Okay, welcome back, everyone. I would now like to invite Dr. Cesar Maldonado, Chancellor of the Houston Community College System, to introduce our first keynote speaker. Thank you, Dr. Maldonado.
Good morning. There's an interesting bio of Chris Bustamante in your program material, and Dr. Bustamante is a first-generation college graduate. So he's a great guy to be sharing the story of how important access is in order to help drive our economy. He was also very much like a lot of the community college students that we have here in Texas. Commuter student, didn't really experience that college housing part of his life like many of us did, because we aspire for the 4-year experience versus the 2-year stackable, incremental. Lifelong learning really prepares you more for lifelong learning than some of the flagships do. I hope I've already enough trouble already. I probably should stay away from those kind of comments. So statistically, he's one of those students that would have had a rough time making it and probably shouldn't be where he is. And that's what makes his story and his comments more valuable. And he's got 3 girls that he's concerned about in terms of their education and their future. And he has a dog, a male dog, because he didn't have a son. His dog's named Toby. The interesting thing that I gleaned from a brief conversation with him is that it's about people. And that's one thing that all of us have in common, is we realize that it's about people. Yeah, money's important, but there never will be enough of it. We need more than what we have. Never be enough. So please help me welcome Dr. Bustamante to the podium and to a good Texas welcome, and learn from his experience and the success that he's experiencing at his college.
Thank you, Cesar. Very much appreciate that introduction, and good morning to all of you. It's great to be with you. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about kind of what's happening out there in the higher ed realm, so that we can revisit that. You're feeling it as well. And then also to talk a little bit about Rio Salado and its story and its place in the higher education sector. And it kind of blows the top off of the discussion this morning relative to the role of faculty and scaling up programming, et cetera. And I'll talk about that as well. I thought I was going to trade the hot and dry weather of Phoenix to a little bit cooler weather when I got here, but it was a little wet and sticky. So, my wife has promised by the weekend we're going to be on a California beach somewhere. So this is my last gig before I go on vacation. So it's a pretty good place to be right now. So I'm also very happy to be with you. I want to applaud the efforts of the Higher Ed Policy Institute of the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board to provide the second, I understand, of the 2 forums that Judith talked about, which encourages the discussion of innovative practices and topics that can really help us all to meet our obligations to serve students more effectively. And I really applaud you for allowing me to be part of that discussion. My remarks today are from a community college perspective, president's perspective in particular, but I think that you will agree that innovative strategies can serve all of our students well, whether you're affiliated with a 2, 4-year, or private institution. My comments today will focus on what is changing in higher education and why it's important to have these discussions today nationally and here in Texas. Share the history behind the creation of RIO, as I mentioned before, and how innovative strategies have helped us to scale to serve well over 65,000 students in one single community college, and was founded to serve non-traditional students in many different ways. And what the future of higher ed delivery might look like from my perspective, from a practitioner's viewpoint as a president, and how innovative strategies will help us to remain relevant in this competitive marketplace that we find ourselves in. So let's first review where we are in higher education today. I asked staff to pull some of the higher ed headlines that we're seeing recently. And we see the University of Phoenix to shutter 115 locations. They've been doing that over the last couple of years. At one time, they had over 435,000 students. They now have about half of that, about 230,000 students. UMUC, University of Maryland University College, is the largest public online community college in America. It's to lay off 70 amid declining enrollments, and it's not unlike first adopters of online learning, like Rio Salados of the world and UMUCs, to be experiencing some shift in the market relative to online when we were the only ones, not the only ones, but the only game in town in our own communities, certainly, for a long time. But it's changing rapidly, and we have to adopt some different strategies to address that if we want to continue to be financially viable. Corinthian's cloudy future. Corinthian College is a for-profit chain of campuses that enrolls 72,000 students across 107 campuses, is likely to go bankrupt in the coming weeks as the U.S. Department of Education has begun to place a hold on its ability to offer financial aid to students. The HBCUs are fighting for survival, and the City Colleges of San Francisco's quest to keep its doors open. So I think there's some shifts going on, and if you're more of a traditional college from a traditional system, there are some shifts happening there. They may not be as dramatic as these, but in the future, we're going to see more and more shifts even within the traditional system as students begin and technology kind of come together to really change and create that disruptive innovation I think that Jim and Sally talked about this morning. Some more dramatic, in more dramatic ways than for others relative to where you are. Higher education today, some of the challenges that we have, but also opportunities relative to what we're being asked to do. The completion goals, 5 years ago, we were issued the challenge by President Obama to increase the number of college degrees and certificates by 5 million by 2020. Which is a very tall order, and it's going to be tough to get there, but we're all working toward that, and it's going to take some innovative strategies to get us there. The skill gap is widening, the skills gap. By 2020, the Georgetown report says that 65% of all jobs will require some sort of post-secondary education preparation, and by 2020, the United States will fall short of qualified workers with qualified credentials by 5 million. We have increasing regulations and accountability. The federal government is now coming out with a scorecard of sorts, sort of ranking system. And as a result of that, we all should be concerned about the way in which they are going to do that. I know we are, and invest ourselves in making sure that that comes out to be more of a positive thing than a negative thing. I'm not sure that can be done, but we certainly try that. But in the world of online, for state authorization, for example, we've been toiling with that relative to making that work for us, having to be registered in every state. Didn't used to happen to be that way. And now we're working with the regional compacts like WICHE and the other compact boards within and commissions within the country under a SARA, a state authorization reciprocity agreements to improve upon that. We've got gainful employment regulations that are coming to us as well, and there are going to be more that the federal government is throwing upon us. There are diminishing resources. In the Maricopa Community College system, where Rio Salado College is from, we get less than 1% of our state support for our college system. We have a $1.7 billion budget, and we get about $8 million from the state. So we like to say that we're more state located than state funded these days. And I think we're going to see more and more of that happen throughout the states. So what does that mean for us? That we're going to have to get a little bit more entrepreneurial about how we control our own destinies and entrepreneurial in terms of how we get more revenues into our systems. And then increasing numbers of adult learners in order to reach our attainment goals that have been given to us by Lumina and the Obama administration. Going to have to reach out more to adult learners. And when you reach out more to adult learners, and I'll tell you the Rio Salado experience in doing that, you have to have innovative strategies and flexibility to be able to get them to succeed. And then staying relevant in the marketplace. We all have to do that. What are our niches in the market? Where do we make a difference for students? What students are we trying to attract to our institutions? Because anymore we can't be all things to all people. We can't all be comprehensive institutions. We have to really target what it is that we do, and maybe partner with some other publics and privates to determine what they do in the marketplace, so that as an ecosystem, we're taking care of the needs of our community, but we're not all duplicating programs. We can't afford to do that anymore. So I asked staff to pull a Texas snapshot of what's going on in Texas, just so it could remind me of what you're experiencing, but also kind of lay the groundwork of why it's important that we reach out to different populations, even beyond the traditional populations that we've been serving. The high school graduate numbers are slightly increasing actually in Texas, but in most of the country it's actually decreasing. By 2016, more than half of all of the high school graduates will be Hispanic, and we know that students who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds tend to be less prepared, not all, but many are less prepared for college, and by 2027 out of 10 will be Hispanic or other minority populations. And so that is going to take different strategies to ensure that those students are successful. The degree attainment gap in 2012, 34.6% of the population hold a 2-year or 4-year degree. And this is critical, but 3 million plus individuals ages 25 to 64 have some college and no degree in Texas. That represents 23.4% of the Texas population. And that's critical. When the CALE organization, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, showed this figure to us in Arizona, we had never really concentrated on it very much. And it really opened our eyes to the fact that even though a real Salado was serving adult learners already and helping with the degree attainment gap, it was really going to take the traditional system, the other 9 community colleges in the Maricopa system also reaching out to adult learners to really make the mark or gain some ground in addressing that attainment gap. This is from a Lumina report, a state-by-state snapshot that talks about the path to 60-degree attainment rate in Texas, and the Lumina Foundation has provided that goal for us by 2025. And the red line represents the annual benchmarks or targets for a straight line trajectory to reach 60-degree attainment by 2025. And the blue is expected percentages of degree holders among 25 to 64-year-olds at the current rate. So this represents Texas, so you can see that there is a big gap of about 21%. So if you just go along as you are, and people are able to take advantage of your programs and earn degrees and certificates, you know, you're going to be at the 39% level, and then where you really need to be is at 60%. So that's the gap. So what are you going to do in terms of extending strategies out as institutions to really meet that gap and to serve those learners who are underserved? And that's what we've been about the business of doing at my particular college. So that's why I thought it was a great segue to begin talking a little bit about how we have served mostly adult students, traditional students as well, but students who really wanted flexibility in their schedules, working around kids and family, and I'll go over the figures, but about 60% of our students are women who are undereducated, underemployed, are working around their kids' schedules, et cetera, and work in online courses or completing them at 11 o'clock at night until 2 in the morning, and are accomplishing a lot, or getting degrees accomplished and certificates and getting those stackable credentials so that they can be better employed and earn higher wages. But Rio was founded. This is the different story for us. We were founded to serve non-traditional learners from the very beginning in 1978. We had an iconic chancellor, Paul Elsner, who came from California with the College Without Walls movement and said, we need one in Maricopa County. He was a new chancellor. He said that talked to him not long ago. He said he had 100 marbles to trade when he came to the new job of chancellor, and he traded 70 of them on Rio Salado in terms of creating it. But you can imagine what it caused to the traditional system to bring in this idea of this college without walls. We have a lot more walls now than we used to, by the way, as my chancellor likes to remind me. But it is a college that was brought in, and the need was that was unmet, was there were a lot of people in the community who couldn't access the traditional system, who couldn't get to the campus, who couldn't take advantage of all of those programs and services that were offered on the campus, and were being left out of higher education. So with his leadership and the board's leadership, they started Rio Salado College, and it was just a one-building place, downtown Phoenix, and then grew now to be the largest college in the 10-college system and the most productive and the most profitable, I might say, with 65,000 students. And we're serving, and I'll talk a little bit about the system for a minute, but we're serving students in various industries and various places like prisons, and we have adult basic ed students, anything the traditional system, any students they didn't really want to serve or couldn't serve because they couldn't come to a traditional campus. And we made a big business out of doing it. We now have the largest program in most every area relative to doing that. So this is the Maricopa Community College System. We're one of the largest, if not the largest, community college system in the country, serving 260,000 students a year in a 9,200 square mile county. So Rio, I like to say, is a non-traditional college in a very traditional system. But what is different is I am a president of an independently accredited college, just like the other colleges are independently accredited under one system. And so I have an equal voice at the table relative to what happens in the district and providing that district leadership, but also about what happens to Rio Salado College in its quest to serve those students who need our services. So quick facts are the 65,000 students served annually, 44,000 students online as a single institution. That's an unduplicated head count. So we're an early adopter of online. In 1995, we set out, and I wasn't there at the time. They tell me the stories of the experience of always wanting to serve a student at a distance. They were doing that through television. They were doing that through newspapers. They were doing that through storefronts and having students come and drop assignments off and that kind of thing. And along came the modality of the internet around 1995, and they started offering a few classes and then found that it was really taking off. More and more people were taking advantage of taking a course online. And then decided that they needed a bigger system to do that. And there wasn't one that existed. There were no LMSs at the time. So we enlisted Microsoft and Dell to come together to establish what we now call Rio Learn, and we're in our version 8 of that, and we have our own LMS, which does all the great things we want it to do, and our faculty was at the center of creating our LMS, and it's got all kinds of cool alerts, and it's customized to suit faculty needs, but also some of our own administrative needs, et cetera. And we've consulted students, of course, in the building of our LMS. And you can imagine how efficient that is now to own your own. And when you want to customize something, you don't have to ask a vendor the question, and then they say, well, why should we do that? You're only one of our clients, and it's going to cost you, by the way, another $100,000 to do that, especially because of our size. We've grown to be, as a single institution, one of the largest, if not the largest, public online college in the U.S. Our student profile, as I said, about 60% of our students are female, and there's a good reason for that because of the flexibility that they need from us. But I understand the percentage of females in traditional higher ed are about that as well. We have more females participating than males in higher ed. Average age is 29. Used to be something like 33, so that's coming down a little bit. And more than 40% of our students are age 30 and older. The other thing is this doesn't really look like much of a traditional college, does it? It's a corporate center, a tower that we purchased about 13 years ago. Behind it is a conference center. It's important for you to understand this because I think it really illustrates how different the model is. And then to the right of it that you can't see is an administrative center, a support services center for where our human resources is, our business services, our faculty are there, the administration. But all of the academic programs and the student services are in the tower. And then we have 12 locations that are no larger than 30,000 square feet throughout that 9,200 square mile county. So we're the institution that serves the whole county rather than a service area within our community within the county. So that's a tall order too, to serve students in that large of an area. I can go from one end of the county to the other. It'll take me an hour and a half in a car to get there on a freeway. That's how big it is. And so we have set out to do that, and as a result of that, that's why serving students at a distance was really important to us, and having the modality of online to be able to do that as well. But we don't just serve online students. We serve 21,000 people in person in addition to that. A lot of people think that Rio Salado College is mostly national. People think that we're a private institution. We only have about 5,000 students outside of our borders, outside of the state of Arizona. And we have an opportunity to expand beyond that, and that's something we're thinking more about doing, but we're going to have some help with that because we don't know how to do that very well. Students just came to us. They would look us up on the web, and they would find that we had these programs they would be able to take advantage of that they didn't have institutions within their states that would offer, and they came to us. And in California, we have over 1,000 students, for example, and growing. And in 47 other states, we have students represented in our college. These are the major programs. Corporate business industry partnerships, 40 plus corporations, and these are all in-person partnerships with the exception of the online. So over about 6,500 students in the corporate and business industry program, credit for training programs. US Airways, USAA, American Express, Discover Card Services, and many others that we certify the trainers. We actually look at the curriculum with our curriculum folks and their trainers and their folks and align it to accreditation standards and our district standards. Certify the faculty have to be just as qualified as we would require for any other course that we offer. We go from there. The reason that our model works is because all of these students who are employees in the corporate and business industry structure are in their facilities. We don't have to create infrastructure to serve them. We have an early college initiative. We were the pioneer of dual enrollment in the state of Arizona, fought the battles at the legislature. We had Maricopa faculty that even testified against us at the legislature to establish programs. But we had the support of the board and the chancellor to go forth. It was established. It's now part of the national policy agenda to have early college initiatives. We grew it to be the largest program in the Maricopa system. Recently, they have realigned it and given some of our students to the other colleges because it's so popular. And I'll tell you what's going on with online too. So as a New Frontier College, as Sally very much understands this, you're out there, out front, piloting all kinds of interesting things. And sooner or later, the traditionals do come around to adopting it. And that's what's happening now, especially with the online. Whereas before it was either a trend or it wasn't quality or it's really not going to be a mainstream of what happens, and it really is. And as the Sloan report I'll talk about in a minute indicates, online is here to stay, and technology is going to continue to develop very rapidly. Incarcerated reentry, we serve prisoners. We have for over 30 years. We call that our captive audience or our gated community. Trying to get a laugh out of you in the middle of the presentation. So we've got some real great successes there. And then our military and veterans, great programs. We have actually a veterans center in a community in the East Valley, and we work with our traditional institutions. We partner with them to serve our veterans and military as well. And then our adult basic education, we have over 10,000 students in ABE programs. And every year we have a GED graduation. We graduated 650 this year. About 250 actually walked and then participated in the graduation. But tremendous milestone for them to get started, and it's in that ceremony and outside of the facility that we have tables set up about their next step, and we call them College Bridge Pathways programs, right? So we say, well, you need to enroll in a college course. You need to ensure that this isn't the last stop. You need to keep going. And it gives us a real opportunity to send them not only to Rio, but to the other 9 institutions of community colleges that we're participating in. And then the online, of course. So it all starts with students, right? That's why we're here. And I never want to forget them. And we have Celicia McFay is an example of our online student population. She dropped out of high school and re-entered and graduated a year late. Soon after, she became a mother and spent the next 10 years providing for herself and her young daughter. And she's part of that gap that you see. She used to be on that attainment gap, right? Because as she started to get some college, she would then drop out and then come back. And at Rio Salado College, she found that the online asynchronous format, and I know you're all talking a lot about the blended and the hybrid, but if we're ever going to get to the goal of 60%, you're going to need to do some asynchronous learning too, and we're going to need to get really good at it. And technology is going to really have to contribute to helping us to do that, so that we get as good a result as we would with an in-person course or with a hybrid or a blended course. But we're never going to get there unless we try, unless we do it together. And we have many more, including our traditional institutions, engaged in serving those students in an asynchronous format. Because people like Celicia would never have had access to higher ed without it. So Celicia graduated with an associate in arts degree and is continuing her studies at Arizona State University now. And she's one of thousands of people that we educate every year. So our innovations to support online learners is controversial in the academy, and it should be. But we think it really works for us, and it works for the students that we were founded to serve. I told you we have our proprietary LMS. We do a lot of work in predictive analytics. We were one of the first to work in that area. We created our own analytics within our LMS. That's what that customization allows you to do. And we found that it was tough to hire the best qualified analytics people. And it was harder to keep up on making that work for us. So we needed a vendor partner to help us, and that was Civitas has joined us to take us to the next level. And I think I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future of higher ed, but I think it's going to take those vendor partners and higher education working together to really improve learning outcomes, in this case with predictive analytics, our retention and persistence toward completion for our students. And we're getting some really good results. The Gates Foundation gave us an NGLC grant of $1 million to put more of this to use with a cohort of 5,000 students. In 5 years, we have to increase their completion rate by 50%. So it's a tall order, but we're willing to be on the journey to take part in the experiment so that we can learn enough so that those things that we do learn that work, we can expand to the rest of our students that we serve. We have robust 24/7 student services, and research suggests, that's been written, that unless you have student support services that are robust, we have online tutoring, we have in-person tutoring, we have instructional help desks. When they can't reach their instructor, they have someone who's expert in that discipline that can talk to them instead on a phone. Many of these services are 24/7. If we don't have a person there to do that, we have a calling service to take their number and to get back to them as soon as possible. We have that technology help desk for people who have problems with their technology, and we have virtual libraries, et cetera. Everything you can imagine that wouldn't require a student to have to come to the campus at all. And many of them do come to the regional centers if their computer's on the frets, or they need to get a proctored exam, and we have testing centers. And many of them do come for services, but if they couldn't, and many of them can't, they don't have to. And the one thing I'd like to say about traditional institutions, that if you really build this for asynchronous learners, your residential attendees, students, can benefit from it too, because for a lot of services they wouldn't have to come to the campus for, don't have to stand in line for, really benefits them. We have an Upsidedown Instruction model that I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, that we have 22 residential faculty and 1,500 adjunct faculty. And I know that Jim and Sally were talking about this morning, and you know how effective that could really be. But what we have are faculty who are experts in their field in the community. They're lawyers, they're accountants, they're doctors, who have a lot of knowledge to impart on our students. They may not be really good at assessment, they may not be really good at creating syllabi and that kind of thing, but they are good instructors with our guidance. And so what we have been able to do is to get a cadre of 1,500. And yes, we pay them about $2,500, $2,800 a class, but they're more interested, their interest is not really in the money, it's in imparting the knowledge. And we have about a 94% retention rate of adjunct faculty, and we invest heavily in them. We give them mentorship opportunities. We mentor them up to 3 semesters. We have online courses that we built in to help them to adapt to the online learning format and to their instructional responsibilities, et cetera. But you have to invest in that. You can't just say you're on your own. And that's what we've done. And we think that it's made a tremendous difference. And then the master course mini-section model has really allowed us to scale. So we offer one English 101 class, a version. We have many faculty who come together to build those courses, and then with the instructional designers, and then they come together periodically to improve them, because they're all teaching these courses too, and they're noticing that there are issues that need to be corrected, and then they correct them. So we have a little bit of a business model and the TQM practices of Plan, Do, Check, Act, and we implement that into our processes too. We have the quality rubrics, Quality Matters rubric. So we care a lot about quality. We know that our quality is really in question a lot as a non-traditional college, so you have to even be better at it. And we were able to win the CHIA award for best assessments in terms of improving student learning outcomes, or being able to understand how students are doing in our courses. So we have every Monday start dates, almost, about 48 start dates a year, maximum flexibility for students. Very hard to pull off as an institution, as you can imagine. But we have a systems approach. We don't have an online learning department. All of our college supports online learning, as all the other programs that we have. And the other thing I didn't mention before is that we have customized teams that support those big programs that I talked about, to grow them, to improve them, to serve our customers, so to speak, our business clients and others with what they need. And so we have teams of people that are dedicated to early college initiatives, a different team for partnership programs, a different team for prison programs, and they understand their business very well. And it's really helped us to organize ourselves that way too. And sometimes we have to organize ourselves differently to make a real difference for who we're serving as well. The business model, we want to be productive, so that's why we have 65,000 students. We want to even be more productive and serve even more students. And the reason that's important, even for our system, is that our constitutional expenditure limitations in our state are such that if you don't have enrollments, you get less money. And until that changes, that's going to be a problem. If you're not producing students then, and very efficiently, then you're not going to raise those expenditure limitations, so that when you do have the next bubble of growth, you're going to be able to have the resources to meet those needs. And so we have been the most productive college in terms of generating enrollments, but also it serves many more students with great services. We're efficient, we're scalable. We built our LMS to serve well over 100,000 students, so we've already thought about how big we might need to be in the future. And then quality, always at the forefront, as I said before. In terms of the 22 residential and 1,500 adjunct faculty, and the investment we've really made in them. It is really our residential faculty that have chosen to keep the ranks smaller. It is the faculty that have decided that that's what they want at Rio Salado College. And they have come to me and said, we tend to be more collaborative, we innovate better, we're more adaptive when we're a smaller group of professionals, and we choose to stay there. And as long as our accreditors are okay with that in terms of, and they tell me what we're more interested in is not what your model is, it's what your model produces. And if you can produce student learning outcomes that we expect you to produce, and the community does, and your board expects you to produce, then whatever model you have, if it works for you, that's fine with us. And so we've proven time and time again. In 2012, we went through our third HLC accreditation with flying colors. No extra visitations, no reports, with a 10-year reaccreditation. So we're really pleased about that. But we worked really hard at ensuring that people knew who we were and what we do. The master course, what we've decided to do, and how it works is with that many sections model, the master course many sections model, is that we've really unbundled the faculty role, what was being discussed this morning, in the sense that the first day of class, and we've never canceled a course, and this allows us to do this, is a student will start, and there'll be 3 students the first week, the first Monday. And then the second Monday, there'll be another 10. And then the third Monday, there'll be another 15. And we cap it at about 25. So we allow that for up to 4 starts in that course. And so the faculty, because the syllabi is already done for them, the assessments are done, the curriculum is done, what we want our faculty to do is to be more invested in facilitating the learning for our students. And so they can do that in where students are in many places within their work, right? So they're chapter 1 or chapter 5 or chapter 10. The faculty really know those chapters really well, and they know what students are supposed to be learning all along the way. So they can facilitate themselves that way because they don't have responsibility for all the other stuff. Now, some people may think that, that takes away academic freedom, et cetera, but our residential faculty are the ones who develop that, are engaged in that with lead adjunct faculty, and they own it. The administration doesn't own it, they own it. And that's the positive thing. So we have really involved them totally in the process with our instructional designers. And then what technology has enabled us to do is to really watch that and to get more consistent quality across the board, so that on assessment 9 or question 9 on assessment 52, every student's getting it wrong, it pops up and as an outlier. And then the instructional technologists and designers get to faculty, or it's an adjunct faculty member who gets the residential faculty member and says, there's something wrong with this, we need to improve it. So technology has really helped us to do that a lot. And the fact that we never cancel a class, and we can guarantee that in the online world, means that we get lots of university students and lots of students from our sister institutions whose class just got canceled and can take advantage of ours. And we have strong transfer and articulation agreements, because they come from the district, so we get to take advantage of those. So we leverage that big system to be able to do that, so lots of our students bank and transfer credits. I want to talk a minute about the higher ed iron triangle. I added completion to this because there were community colleges who were starting to think we needed to raise our admission standards a bit. And I thought we would lose some access there. So I thought, well, we need to equalize out completion as well. But we've got quality and costs. And this is something that comes from the National Center for Public Policy in Higher Ed and the Public Policy Agenda of 2008. But this is what we're really trying to do, is to keep in balance the ability to scale, provide maximum access, to minimize our costs per student. And McKinsey & Company found us to be 44% below our peer institutions nationally in average per cost per student. And then the quality, keep the quality up, and then also get more students to complete. That's our goal, and that's what we're committed to doing. And I know Michael Crow at Arizona State University, who has the largest public university 2 miles up the street from us, believes this too. that you can grow a university to be 100,000 students, still control costs, have great quality, and have access and completion. And more of us have to believe that, because in order to reach those attainment goals, we're going to have to believe it and do it. So if you don't believe just what I say about us, Fast Company ranks in the top 10 education companies in the world, not higher ed institutions, but education companies for our work in predictive analytics, and that was a nice accolade. Gates Foundation has recognized us as one of 12 highly performing online institutions, and McKinsey & Company has really named us as a highly productive institution in the US, similar to Western Governors University that was also named. So just a few minutes on the future of higher education delivery from my perspective. I think more than from the Sloan report, there are more than 7 million students that are currently online. 1 in 3 students taking at least one class online, and the online growth now outpaces traditional enrollment growth. And my presidential colleagues from my other colleges will tell you that, because they're growing their programs in the Maricopa system. And there was a strategic decision, really there wasn't a strategic decision to not allow others to do it, that we never went into the hybrid and blended business because we were serving that asynchronous learner, and we left that to our 9 other community colleges, and they were doing it very well. But they've now asked HLC for approval to do full degrees online because they think to stay competitive in the marketplace, they needed to do that. So what that has done is really competed with us, gone head-to-head with us relative to that market, and we are beginning to see some dwindling numbers on our end. And so we need to go out to bluer oceans, right? Have you ever heard of the Blue Ocean Strategy? It was a book that was written, and when the waters get bloody and they're red, it's time to move on. And it's not that we won't continue to serve the students within our county. We're going to do that. We're going to improve everything we can to retain our place in the market. But it's time to go out and innovate even further, maybe with these next generation learning models, et cetera, that I'll talk about in a minute. But as long as the online outpaces the traditional growth, we're going to see more and more of it. And the awakening of the sleeping giant, there was an article in Inside Higher Ed that talked about that. And the more that the traditional institutions begin to embrace these innovations, the more students are going to get served, the closer we're going to get to our attainment goals, and we're going to be okay. Online's going to get even better because you're part of it. We need to leverage technology to scale. It's changing rapidly. All you got to do is look at the Apple company and Microsoft and others and seeing what they're doing and how we're going to be able to adapt that to instruction. We have to be quick to adapt these new technologies. We can't take 20 years to do that if we're going to make a difference for our students. And so we're going to have to be busy about that work. The next generation learning models, I think Sally's talked about, and they're really good at the competency-based learning, WGU. All of us have to be better at this, or at least many of us, to serve those learners who learn best this way. Personalized learning, adaptive learning, and prior assessment strategies. And what we do in the community college in Maricopa in particular, we spend $90 million a year as a system on remedial education. And that we just can't afford to do that anymore. We're going to have to get better at developing strategies like modularizing the curriculum and coming up with better diagnostic tools so that we can get to meet that student's need and move them onto the credit-based programs more quickly, more rapidly. And we're going to have to work in the K-12 system, partner with them to get them more of that remediation with that modularization, I can say it, of the curriculum early on rather than later so that we can start them right away. And then learning communities. Sally's involved in creating one with the Gates Foundation for competency-based education. We're involved in some with learning analytics. We're involved in a project that's Gates funded with adaptive learning with the Pearson Company, getting some great results on developmental English and how we're improving retention and completion rates there for those students. It's wonderful work, because when we can work with other colleges and universities across the country and not work in a silo, it's better. I mean, we learn so much about it. You know, hey, we're having this problem. What are you doing about this? What is your strategy to solve that? And then the experts like Sally in the room or others, the Mark Millirons of the world with predictive analytics. You know, how can we, you know, adapt the products to serve us better too? Entrepreneurial initiatives. Our chancellor started the Maricopa Corporate College, is now extending out throughout the country with big companies to bring revenues into the Maricopa system. And you know, I think we're looking at Rio Salado as branching out into the rest of the country as another way in which we can be more entrepreneurial, because we haven't really had a focused approach at doing that before, even though many thought we did. We think we can make several gains on the entrepreneurial side relative to that, but we're going to need corporate partners to help us to do that. And then regionalization. That ecosystem here in Austin, in Dallas, in Houston. What are you all doing to work together to make sure that you're not duplicating programs and that you're meeting the needs of your employers, rather than all of you working on that in your silos? Hopefully you're working together to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the employer-based community as well as your general community. So we're going to see more regionalization in higher ed. We just can't afford to do otherwise. We're going to see leveraging of partnerships, public and private higher ed institutions doing more, coming up with more agreements to have joint admissions and the things that you've seen before, but we're going to have more of it. And I have higher ed institutions, bachelor's degree granting institutions that are knocking on my door every day wanting me to send them students. Why? Because they know that if they graduate from a community college, they'll have about a 90% chance, 85 to 90% chance of finishing at their institution. It's a great feeder strategy. Business and industry, we talked a little bit about the skills gap and how we have to address that, but you see the University of Phoenix getting closer to business and industry. A lot of the universities, the ASU Starbucks deal that you've seen recently with ASU Online, to see more of that kind of thing. And we need to do that if we're going to be competitive globally in the marketplace, and that's where we need to be. And then I will say, the vendor partnerships. They hate it when I call them vendors. They would rather me call them just partners, but I'll just call them vendor partners because they are helping us to do many things. As I talked about the Civitas group, when we got to the point where we couldn't help ourselves anymore, it was too expensive, they can invest in the kinds of technology and people that it needs to get us to the next level. And even for our online expansion, we're going to need people who understand marketing really well, who understand markets in other communities that we can't do ourselves. So I know WGU has been doing some work relative to with their publishers in terms of making them a little bit more responsible for student learning outcomes. And I think we're going to see more of that as well, but it's a great best practice. Credit for prior learning, I've got to give it a plug. I'm on the board of trustees for CALE, the Council of Adult and Experiential Learning, but it's going to be really important if we're going to meet that attainment gap, right? 2.5 more times likely to persist they are if they have credit for prior learning, 65% more likely to earn a degree and accelerate their time to completion. This comes from CALE, who's been in this industry for 40 years. The problem is that maybe they can get this more at the community college, but a lot of times it won't transfer to a university. And we have to work together to see how we can get these students the credit they deserve that will last beyond just the community college, that will transfer to the university as well. And you know, if we and our faculty bless the credit, then that ought to be good enough all the way through the system. And then these are some key strategies for change that the American Association of Community Colleges has talked about recently. Clear, coherent academic career pathways we need more of. Stackable credentials based on clearly defined competencies, alignment of learning across education sectors, and transparency and accountability. And I think we can all agree, no matter what sector we're from, that these are very important and applicable. And then I'm going to end this presentation on the student-centric solutions. This student, Patrick Valenzuela, is a police officer with the city of Glendale in Arizona. And Patrick's story speaks to the idea of thinking differently to serve students. He's a working parent of 3 young children, as you can see, a first-generation college student, a U.S. Navy veteran, took 90% of his courses at Rio Online while working swing shift as a police officer, utilized credit for prior learning, 39 credits through his law enforcement academy that Rio certifies, has the support of his employer to pursue his degree, transferred to Northern Arizona University in a 90-30 program to complete a bachelor's degree. So Patrick's situation is not uncommon, yet his pathway to degree really is. His success is an example of leveraging technology and partnerships in order to reach his goal. And we're going to see more of that in the future. I'm hopeful as well, as we begin to see more of you offering more of an expanded education opportunity to students who deserve it in our communities. So are you prepared? I'm going to leave you with this, to meet the needs of the future as a higher ed professional, given all that we have in terms of challenges, but opportunities as well. So thank you for allowing me to be part of your discussion. Happy to answer any questions if we have time.
We have time for a few questions.
Yeah.
$44,000 44,000 online students. Is that a sort of disaggregated account, or is it duplicated head count?
Unduplicated head count.
Unduplicated. Thank you.
So some are taking 3 credits, some are taking 12, but they're one person.
I'm Mike Abiadi with the Southern Regional Education Board in Atlanta. And first of all, I want to thank our Texas colleagues for having this session. This is absolutely wonderful. Really appreciate it. As we look at our 16 member states, there's something that comes up very clear for higher ed. There's a great deal of angst about moving from bricks and mortar to bricks and clicks. What advice would you give to the administrators in this room about how to make that transition, and not to assume that because online learning is popular that we skip the bricks and clicks part and we just go directly to the whole on-learning programs?
Well, I'll tell you what we've done in Maricopa Community College District. Our last bond was almost $1 billion that we passed in the county with about 76% approval rating. And this next bond that they want to have in 2016, I believe, is now about half of that, because they figure what we need to do with existing bricks is just renovate the buildings, but not really add very many more, and then really take advantage of the technology to be able to meet our needs beyond that. So it's going to take bricks and clicks, but maybe just current bricks, not a lot more, and then more clicks. And you're going to be able to leverage that to be able to scale, as I talked before, but reduce your overall costs per student if you're able to be productive enough to scale it. So I think if it's presented in that way, and the other thing is we can't afford to do beyond that, right? Our taxpayers are saying absolutely not. It's already costing so much. It's costing students already too much. So you need to adopt other strategies that will allow you to do the work, but not cost a whole lot more money in doing so. So yeah, it can cost a little bit more money if they're getting the benefit, but not a whole lot more money. I don't think our taxpayers and others and our policymakers are going to stand for that.
Hi, my name is Valerie Jones. I'm with Odessa College. It sounds like you've had some fantastic access to technology as it's developed, being there from the ground up. What suggestions or solutions have you found for authenticating student identity in distance learning?
Well, that's been a big issue in distance learning. And so we have it within the LMS to authenticate, you know, the passwords, identification, the pace at which they're moving through their work. Is it the same person each time? We also have to authenticate them just by law relative to, is that person the person? So whenever they're first register, they have to give us picture ID, all that kind of thing. And that has helped us with fraud too. There's been some fraud in the online education as well, so we've had to authenticate people early on before they even get to the financial aid system to ensure that that person is the person. And then every time we require someone to take a proctored exam, they are then authenticated there as well. So there are steps in the process, even in the online system, the LMS, that will allow us to know whether they are indeed the person that is taking the class. Did I answer your question effectively? Yeah.
One of the things that I wish you would address would be textbooks and learning materials. So you talked about vendor partnerships, but have you partnered with some of the open source repositories or collaboratives to provide cheaper, more affordable textbooks?
Well, that's a great question. And yeah, we have our own OER kind of system that we have collected through our faculty have led that effort, and there are courses, disciplines like math and I believe sciences and the English in particular have really taken advantage of that, and we're hoping that it's going to grow to many of the other disciplines. So we have partnered to really offer our own. We have a partnership with Pearson to reduce textbooks by 50%, but we need, as a college that's online, to have more digital materials, and we have not crossed that bridge very effectively. You would think we would have, but we haven't. But you know why we haven't? Because we're in a traditional system, and we have a bookstore called, that we have to go through, and so that's kind of frustrating, but we're trying to figure our way through that, and as those traditional companies become more of the age, then we're going to be able to take more advantage of that. So yeah, we have some partnerships, but we've created some of our OER materials ourselves as well. But I think, every time you do partner, if it's not open source, it becomes more expensive, so you kind of have to watch your price point on how you do and what you do really effectively. But not so much with vendors, but certainly have been able to create much of our own OER using those open source other materials that are available for us to use. Sure. One more. Time for one more. Jim. I was waiting for the question, Jim.
I'm a really nice person. I don't know
know
why
you
people always
are.
react. I really am. I just want to say, rainbows and unicorns. But no, my real question is, you have 22 full-time faculty and 1,500 adjunct. And you noted that, most of your faculty just do it for the love of teaching. But how can you have a profit, and you're profitable, right? A profit-driven system that's run almost entirely on part-time, underpaid labor, and not think that there's going to be a larger issue. I mean, systemically. I mean, that's not just about Rio Salado, that's across the country. And I just hope that we don't in this room take that as a solution, is kind of just underfund and hope that everyone's going to work for the love of teaching. Because that's not going to help us in public education, and it's not going to help us in higher ed at all as a solution. But just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your perspective. I think it's really going to take both. I don't think it's just one or the other. I think our system really needed a Rio Salado College. I think your systems need a similar type of approach. It doesn't have to be a Rio, but maybe it's two of your institutions serving more of the underserved than were before, so you can make some inroads on that attainment gap. But the other thing I like to say to groups is that we can never really, what's the phrase about missing a crisis, really losing out on a crisis. You really learn a lot through a crisis, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. Thank you very much, Sally. And we shouldn't do that here. That when we build back our capacity as we've gone through cuts and as we'll see growth in the future of our students, it'll come back. But are we going to do the same old things we did before when we build back that capacity? Is it going to be a little bit of the old and more of the new? That's kind of what I would ask you to do, is to look more intently on what instructional models really work for your students, not for your institution, not for your faculty, but for the students. And organize yourselves around that. And some of that's going to mean you're going to need more residential faculty, but some of it's going to mean that there's also a place for more adjunct faculty to deliver that. But the bottom line is it's a focus on student learning outcomes. And if you get them with newer models, that what you're looking for, that are even better or the same as the older model, then you should adopt those and begin to expand them and make them better. And I think it's really going to be the leadership of our faculty, through the leadership of our faculty, that are open to that are really going to help us to get there, and it's really critical that they are. So thank you.